First of all, thank you for the invitation. As much notice as I have, I can deliver accordingly. I'll just concentrate on a short few ideas on the Seder, mainly on an area which is not expounded upon too much. It says towards the middle of the Seder, introducing the whole Parsha of the Buchas, which Yitzchak gave to Yaakov Avinu ultimately. But the introduction to that is Vayi ki zukein Yitzchak, when Yitzchak became older, Vatechenu einov me'rois, which is usually described as his eyes dimmed. He could not see so well. He described essentially as onset of blindness. Vayikru es Esav b'nei Agudol, and he called Esav and he invited him to receive the Ruchs. There is a very fascinating Sipona. And the Sipona says, first of all, about the daughters-in-law, that that there's a smichas here, because Esav married two girls. One of them was Yehudis Pasperi Achiti, the second one was Bosmas. And the two of them were Moiras Ruach LeYitzchak LeRivko, literally, as described in Rashi, because they were Oived Avodah Zura, and all their deeds were Lahachis uLeitzvoi, incensing and trying to provoke both Yitzchak and Rivko by in their house serving idol worship, which was so detestable to both of them. It had the effect on Yitzchak that he became blind because of the smoke which they were incensing, and Rivko was terribly aggravated and upset as a result. But returning to our Spona, Moiras Ruach, first of all, he describes as Moira in a different translation on the slant of the word, because it says by a Nuzir in Moira loyale al roishoy, which is essentially a knife or a blade. And they were as if turning a blade into the hearts of Yitzchak and to Rivko, who had to watch and had to be party to such a terrible event within their home. But then, on the next part, it says, Vatechenu einov, says the Sephona, K'moishe kuru le'eli. This is because he didn't admonish his children. And in the same way that Eli Cohen was regarded and criticized because he didn't criticize his own children and the manner which they behaved with other women. So therefore it says ve'einav kumon, and it goes on. This dimming of eyes and blindness was not something that happened to Avram, neither did it happen to Yaakov. On the contrary, Avram was vigorous. In his old age, he married another woman, and he had children from her, and he didn't suffer blindness. Even Yaakov Avinu, that it says ve'ein Yisrael komti mizoken, it's still vaya Yisrael's b'nei Yosef v'yomim mi'ele. There was no problem with him seeing what he was supposed to see. So also there was a reason why Yitzchak Avinu was unfortunately plagued by blindness. Says the Sephona, because Sheloi Micho Beibuno, he did nothing to stop what was going on with Esav. And therefore, the result was that he witnessed the Avodah Zarah in his own house. And he went blind. The Kasha, obviously, is... Oh, we'll get to that in a few moments. Let's first of all understand the Sephona, because that means that there's some equation here, that Chinuch essentially looks like that there was a midah keneged midah of a sort. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, you chose not to see what was facing you in the eyes, and therefore you didn't apply your vision in an objective way. You chose to look aside. So the Rebbeinu Shloim took away your vision at the end of your life. You didn't want to see, okay, so you won't see. An amazing phenomenon. And now, we can understand from that and deduce from that. Sometimes in Chinuch we are faced with dilemmas like that. A child sometimes comes to his father and his mother, or a girl, and asks them that they want something in particular, a particular book, a particular telephone, a particular technological appliance, or whatever it may be, which is always in Yuna D'Yoma today. And the kid panicked and macht Meshige, and therefore the child sometimes perseveres, and the father or the mother says, "Gib noch chashnish kakoy." But that's what we call short vision, because you're only looking for the immediate. The pressure is on, and you want to get out of it. So you accede, and you give in. But long term, this is a dangerous perspective. And sometimes you need to look at these things with a vision. What's going to happen later on? And this is what we deduce from this phone over here. That the Rebbeinu Shloim was in such a high level of Yitzchak Rabini, obviously an element of a midde keneged midde. You didn't have vision. You didn't want to respond to Esav's evil, so at the end of the day, your vision was taken away from you. But there's another big question here. The question that we are asking is that those two daughters-in-law who were serving Avodah Zarah and were sacrificing and bringing incense, and the smoke was having this effect on Yitzchak, why wasn't it having the same effect on Rivka? Why didn't she go blind? Which is a Haz and a Kasha. Question is posed, but it's worth pointing out the following. Let's understand which house Yitzchak came from. He was brought up in Kedusha V'Tahara by a mother, Suri Maini, a father, Avram Avini, and there is no parallel to such a chinuch. But if you look at Rivka, in the end of the day, she was brought up in Besuel's house, and her brother was Luva. And there was a pervading of Avodah Zarah large, because you can see, in the moment Eliezer came, he said to him, why stand outside? We've checked out all the idols. This is the way the reverence which he gave to his gods. As soon as a guest came, there's a few pounds there, a few dollars, then out go the idols. But they were there. So we can see that Rivka, on the one hand, was brought up in a house which had Avodah Zarah, and therefore the incense of her daughters-in-law did not affect her. Masha Enken, Yitzchak was brought up in the home of Avur and Subo. This blinded him. He was so spiritually sensitive that there was nothing he could do about it. It had this effect on him. But if you think about it, chronologically, let's just work out how old was Rivka when she left the home? 3 years old. And then she married Yitzchak. It was 20 years before she had a child. That means that she was over 23 when Esau and Yitzchak were born. Yaakov. And now we know that this whole episode happened when Esau was at the age of 40, because it got a Masorah, wie der Tat hat sich geführt. It was Chmur al-Tzlon, Ma'ananush Tachas Ba'alayen, like Rashi says, took women who were HSC, she had no problem with this. But Chastum, Tat hat sich geführt, aber Chaste bei 40, ich fühle mich auch für die Tate. And consequently, that brings Rivka to the age of 63 years old when this whole Parsha with the daughters-in-law happened. Now, if you take that in the balance and you think to yourself, 3 years of a little child witnessing idol worship, 60 years of living in the close proximity of Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak as a husband, a house permeated with Kedisha, Tahara, Torah, Chesed, in alle gute Sachen. And therefore, now, when it comes to the acid test, Yitzchak goes blind and Rivka does not go blind. You take the ratio of 3 to 63, it seems to be 60 long years in the right place as opposed to 3 in the wrong. That we understand from here the effects of what a child sees when they're very, very young. That even when she was only 3 years of age and she was there in the home of Besuel and Luvon, that the hashpur was so great those 3 years that when she became 63 years of age and the ratio was thousands and thousands of times more in the other extreme, nonetheless she did not become blind, which answers this question. So of course, the Midah Tova Meriba. Imagine a child which is subject and is witness to a home where it's a house of Torah, a house of Zmiras on Shabbos, Mechaber mentioned, and how the Yerushalayim, Ehrlichkeit, Tahara resonates and permeates the home, then how much it's going to affect the child as he grows up and takes it with him as he grows older. Are we doing for time? Okay. So you know what, I'll share with you a story which I heard not so long ago, because when Yaakov Avinu went in to his father, so we say, Vayurach es reach b'gudov, he smelled the fragrance of his clothes, which we understand as being the Reich Geneiden, Tapirchen, Kadischen, as Rasha mentions. And he automatically recognized that the visitor that he's got is coming from a very high spiritual platform. There was a story that there was a Yid was from America a long time ago, and he wanted to make a trip with his children to Eretz Yisrael, and he had his time mapped out, and part of the timetable was that he was going to spend time by as many Gedolim that he was able to, and take a bracha and a blessing from each of them. He took his children, of course, to the Mekoyim HaKadoshim, and he went with his sons to Rabbi Doody Yosef. When he entered the room, so Rabbi Doody Yosef stood up, and he said to the Shamshon there, Ani mariach reich Gan Eden bo. I can smell the scent of something sublime. And they looked at this American Yid, couldn't really work out what it was that he was referring to. And Rabbi Vadia was speaking through an interpreter, because this man spoke in Yiddish and English, said to him, he couldn't work out why Rabbi Vadia would say such a thing. Rabbi Vadia said, אני מריח, אני אומר לך, צריכים לברר. And he asked the children, the two sons, to leave the room. They did what the roof said, and they left. Rabbi Vadia says to him, Tagid. He hasn't got anything to say. So the helper said that maybe you can recall from years ago. This Yid, the father, was a Holocaust survivor. And after the war, that's in 1945, he'd been subjected to all the horrors of the camps, and his own father and him survived the war. And his father took him after the horrors that they'd seen, and they went on a quest to do the following. It was known that the Germans maximized the profiteering from the Yidden, not only to stealing their paintings, their jewelry, their homes, and everything that belonged to them, but actually the bodies of the Jewish people were reduced to gold teeth, which formed bullion, the hair, which went into mattresses, and even their skin, which was made into lampshades. Rahmun al-Islam, the worst part of it was the soap that was made out of, how would you say, reines jüdische Fett. And they reduced it into soap bars. And notwithstanding the fact that these two people, the father and son, had seen what they'd seen and experienced what they experienced, they went out of their way to try and find as many of these bars of soap that they could and buy them and collect money and bury them. And this amazing feat took them from town to town, and this is what they did. They paid money which they collected, went to the shkutzim which had it, and redeemed it and buried it. Whatever reason it was, father and son parted way, and he went to another town. And the town where the son was when he was a young boy took him to a place where the goyim amongst themselves were discussing that this man pays for soap. And there was one Polish shayitz who had access to boxes of them. And he went to the boy and he said to him, "You want soap? You want soap? How much you pay?" And he said to him, "My father is the one that collects the money. I haven't got, only 2 zlotys I have in my pocket. I give them gladly to you. That's all the money that I've got. If you give me the soap for that," he says, "but I got boxes." He says, "I'm sorry, that's all I've got." This Paul was not satisfied with the 2 zlotys, but on the other hand, he's money hungry. He looks him up and down. "You're wearing a thick pair of wool trousers. It's a freezing cold winter. I'll make do with those trousers. You take my trousers, these threadbare rotten trousers, and give me the wool trousers that you were given by the Americans." The boy didn't think twice. He went behind the hedge, he took the trousers from the goy, and gave him the thick, warm trousers that he had that were keeping him. And he gave them to the goy. He handed them the trousers and the 2 zlotys, and the guy brought him out crates of soap, boxes. He took the boxes, he dug a big hole, and he buried them. Tears in his eyes, he said Kaddish over all the contributing people for this particular bars of soap. And this is the story that he related to Rabbi Doody Yosef, who said, "Imani mariach derech Gan Eden yesh siba." And this is what he detected in this particular man. And the interesting fact was that the man passed on to a better world shortly thereafter, and the Gabuim of Rabbi Ovadia went to be Menachem over all the children. And they came to the children and they related the story, and the children had no idea that their father had ever done anything like this in his lifetime. Vayurach Israyach Begudov. How is it on time? You want to continue? Okay, so we'll say, I'll tell you something else. I remember that there was a very interesting kasha on, I'll tell you a vote with the master, because that is something which I was particularly taken by. And that was that there's a kasha altogether. We say, Vayeh Yitzchak es Esav ki hoye tzayt b'fif. V'Rivka heves es Yaakov. There's many halchem in this. First of all, there's a Lushan Uva and a Lushan Hoive. It says, Vayeh Yitzchak es Esav, he loved Esav, which is the Lushan Uva. Rivka heves is a Lushan Hoive. So one of the touches is that it's a hava sheteluya b'duva b'botl b'duva b'teila hava. Something which is dependent, the love on something is b'botl b'duva b'teila hava. So therefore, his love for Esav was dependent on kitzai b'fiv. If this reason is no longer in existence, so then, of course the love will also disappear. Masha Enkein, Rivka's love for Yaakov was ongoing because it was pure. But then there's another Nikita. How can we fathom really Yitzchak loving Esav altogether because he fed him? There are some very sharp Mamur Chazal on this subject, but the time will not allow for them. But then there's another question. If indeed, like we say, that Yitzchak thought that Esav was really worthy of the bruchas, and that he's supposed to get them, why was it he found that the gates of Gehenna opened up? He's known Esav for so long, and he never sensed that there was any element of Gehenna or anything wrong with him. It's a very strange phenomenon to know that he went on. But there's Gemuras which explain that, why Yitzchak had this tzayid b'fif. But I'll just relate the story and then tie it up. There was a big tzaddik called Rav Shimon Amshinover. Rav Shimon Amshinover was one of the people that went with the Miri Yeshiva to Shanghai during the war. They had a famous story where he met up with the Japanese, head of the city, and explained about anti-Semitism there and why the Germans hate the Jews so much. But there were with Rav Shimon Amshinover a small group of Hasidic boys that went with him. And all those boys that came up together with him resided in the yeshiva. But there was one who Rav Shimon said to him, "You've got a brother here in Shanghai. You go stay with him." But that brother was a communist. A go-gummer, a soynu yisul, bedam. And this Chassidish Bucher was wondering, why would it be inflicted upon him to go and stay with his brother? For what reason? So, the brother was not only a communist, he was an agnostic, he didn't believe in Rabbeinu Shalom. And then this Bucher came back to Rav Shimon and said to him, "I'm suffering there. Why do I have to stay there? Why can't I move in with the rest of the boys into the yeshiva? I can't even eat a morsel in his house. Halt eine Weile seit Reifes, esst ich kein Kusche, halt ich kein Shabbos." And he sees me with the tefillin, he laughs at me and he scoffs at me and makes fun of me and takes pleasure in doing so. Why do I have to be there? And Rabbi Shimon didn't answer him. But Rabbi Shimon said, "You know what, you've got a problem with food? I'll give you food from the yeshiva and a plate and your own knife and your own fork. You want a problem with kailam and eating in his house? Stay there." And this went on through the war. He survived the war, they went back from Shanghai, and of course this man went and he settled in the United States of America. When he got there, a while later, he was visited by two boys who looked Orthodox boys, almost a yeshivish style dress. And he asked them, When they came to his home, he had no idea who they were. And they said, Alachem Shulam, we are your nephews. You what? He says, yeah, you don't recognize us. It's a few years has passed since then, but you stayed in our house in Shanghai. He looks at them, and beneath the beard and the hat and the jacket, he could actually see these were the faces of the two youngsters that were there. He didn't say anymore. They carried on. He said, you remember you used to wear those boxes on your head in the morning? And you looked really connected when you closed your eyes. And we were fascinated, and we couldn't understand what was it that you were doing, because our father certainly never told us anything about tefillin. But we were taken by it. It was an amazing phenomenon. And when we asked our father, he said, oh, we're so stupid. Can't you see if the man is demented? Who wears boxes on the head in this day and age with straps? What is he trying to throttle himself? Don't ask such questions. It's all nonsense, baloney. And the more he tried to fob us off, the more curious we were. And the more we could see that he's got such an antagonism towards our uncle, the more we had reason to understand more about our background. And we went and we checked and we read and we found out, and we were excited and empowered to find out more about our religion. And the more we found out about Judaism, the more we wanted to be part of it. And this led us to embrace ultimately the way back towards Orthodoxy, and we came and settled in America. Once we were here, we did a lot of research to try and find out where you were. But we wanted to come here to thank you, because if not for you, we wouldn't be here either. The end of the story is that both of them grew up to become Rosh Hashivas. Reb Shimon Amshinover managed to survive and came to the United States for a few years after the war as well. And this man went to Reb Shimon and he told him he came to apologize to him because he complained at that time. And he didn't realize the vision and the foresight that Reb Shimon had to recognize that the reason that he wanted him to stay by his uncle was very specifically because he wanted to be by his brother because of the two boys. But all he told him is as following. Chazal zogen. Lo'olam yehi smol doiche v'yamin mekareves. The left should distance, the right should bring close. How do we normally explain it? That if you've got a balance between the two, then the right hand, which is the significant one in drawing close, should be the dominant one and the stronger one. The left, which is distancing, should be the weaker one. And in the balance of the two, the right should certainly be the more overwhelming and powerful one. But I beg to differ, said Reb Shimon. I think, we know about small and yamin. Small and yamin has got very much to do altogether about Sitra Acha and Sitra Gedisha. And as far as I'm concerned, we speak about Doiche, that only comes from the Sitra, the Acha. And if we speak about Makarev, which is Yamin, that is from the Sitra, the Gedisha. And in my lexicon, there is no place for small, period. And therefore, if there's any opportunity of being Makarev, that is what really should be the overwhelming factor. And Memaila, I wanted you to go to your brother so that the children might have an opportunity to have that Yamin Mekareves. Esau enjoyed Yitzchak's affection. He had his love, even though the pursuits of Esau were clearly evil. But Tzayid Befiv means that Yitzchak had a bargaining factor. What's the bargaining factor? Which brings us to the famous Gemara in Shabbos, which says that when the Rebbeinu Shloim had Rabbi Yochel Tanas against the Jewish people, he came to the various others, including Avraham, including Yaakov, who all said that Eden are accountable for their deeds. And they either have to face have to face up to and be accountable and responsible for any iniquities that they have transgressed, and there's no way out. But then Yitzchak said, Rebbeinu Shalom, hold on a second. How long does a man live? Then he goes on a long negotiation about how he spends sleeping and how much he spends eating and about his bodily needs. At the end of the day, he says to him, Palgalai, Palgaloch. We go 50-50. And therefore, I take upon me 50%, you take upon yourself 50%. Incidentally, it's worth noting that Yitzchak is Begematria 208, and Sayid is Begematria 104. So you've got the Palgolai and Palgaloch. But in the end of the day, who was the defense? Who was the one that stood up for Klal Yisrael? Who was the one that said, Rebbeinu Shalom, don't destroy. I had one like this in my house. He sinned in front of me. He was a bad boy, and he was constantly transgressing iniquity after iniquity. I watched, and I did not throw him out of the house. And I tried, and I persevered to be Mekar of him, and to hold him close, and to keep that Esau as best as I possibly could in the given circumstances. So when the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Yitzchak, okay, Palgalai, Palgaloch. But that's the Tasha. Yeah, Yitzchak as Esau, the hava which he gave to him was Kitzayid Befiv, that one day there will be some opportunity of answering, of giving some sort of an account to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Why the Rebbeinu Shalom should be Mochel Klal Yisrael? Because I too had a sinning son, and I didn't chuck him out of the house. I kept him there, and I gave him love unconditionally. And B'mayla, I ask of you, Rebbeinu Shalom, please do the same.